So there's this thing called Google autofill. You start to type in a question into Google and you'll notice that a bunch of other related questions will pop up below it. These recommendations are things that people search every single day. And this is Google like anticipating what you might ask based on the frequently asked questions related to what you're typing. So all of this is Google autofill. And today I typed in just a common basic, how can I lose weight in Google? And then I went through the alphabet, put like, how can I lose weight? A, how can I lose weight? B, to see what would be the next most common thing that people ask in relation to how can I lose weight. So I went through the entire alphabet and answered every single question on how can I lose weight, Google autofill. Let's dive into it. My name's Autumn. I'm a certified clinical nutritionist with my master's in nutrition human performance. And today's video is sponsored by Element. More on them in a bit. Okay, so how can I lose weight? A, after menopause. So after menopause, things do get tricky, but really just as we age in general, there are a couple of things that happen. The big ones is that we start to lose muscle really quickly and we start to lose bone really quickly. But also a couple of other things happen that we don't talk about as often on this channel. And that's that people tend to be a lot less active. Maybe they're also not doing as much of the strength-based stuff that they're doing previously. But also, as we age, people tend to eat less protein, especially from animal-based sources, because it can get harder to eat. And this isn't just me making this up. This is actually something like a very basic fact that we had to learn in my undergrad for nutrition and dietetics. As we age, just based on like a bunch of various factors, but specifically around dental factors as well as our body's reduced ability to break down protein, people tend to eat less protein, which is very ironic because our protein needs actually start to go up by about 25%. So we're eating less and we also have higher needs from that increased muscle loss and increased bone loss, which causes that big protein gap. So broad strokes, the three main tools after menopause to help lose weight would be to make sure that you are actually hitting your protein needs. And specifically from animal-based sources, I'll get into exactly some specific tips on that in just a second. Most people do well with aiming for at least 30 grams of complete protein at every single meal, but some people need more than that. Aiming for about 8,300 steps of walking per day. So using something like a step tracker is really useful for that too. Strength training for 2 to 3 days per week is also really an essential tool. It doesn't have to be like intense hitting the squat rack type of weight training, but something that actually challenges your body. It could just be body weight. If you need a personal trainer to help walk you through that, great. Or you can use, there's like a plethora of apps at this point. You can use any one of those that is more resistance focused. But all of that is really needed to help counter this muscle loss, this bone loss, and also this increased protein need. Because as we lose that muscle, it increases our insulin resistance, it slows the metabolism. That's why people tend to have a harder time losing weight after menopause. So going back to protein, because protein is really the crux of the situation, you need to make sure that you're eating enough protein. But for a lot of people, it can be hard to break down. We just have less of that intrinsic factor as we age. And again, a lot of people have dental issues that make it hard to chew like those tougher pieces of meat. So better protein options as we age that are really easy to break down and digest, but also tend to be less expensive, which is great, and don't require as much intensive chewing. Eggs. That's a very great one. Cottage cheese, ground beef, because it is ground. So a lot of that like initial chewing is done for you. And it's one of the less expensive cuts of meat. Slow cooked meat. So again, it is really easy to chew because it is soft. So that would be things like pork butt that you put in like a slow cooker, or maybe pot roast or stewing beef. Fish is also great because it is one of those softer proteins. Canned tuna or canned salmon, sardines and anchovies, as well as Greek yogurt. Okay, number 2, how can I lose weight? B, but still eat what I want. So I'm a huge advocate for eating what you love. That is like, again, a really important factor with my entire channel, the like 900 plus videos that I put out over the last 6+ years, all centered around eating foods that actually make you happy, but also support your goals and make you feel great and live the life that you want to live. Which is why we also need to recognize that there are just some foods that were designed to be addictive. And those are the ultra processed foods. When you search this question of like, how can I lose weight but still eat what I want? People just tell you like, oh, just get in a calorie deficit. Just eat the same type of food, but eat less of it. That can work for a short amount of time, but it does not work for the long term. First of all, because that food is not satiating, it is addictive, it is designed to get us to overeat. Over 70% of our food supply is ultra processed foods. And in America, we have an obesity rate that keeps going up and now it's in the 40%. So even though you might be able to hold off from eating as much for a short amount of time, eventually biology will kick in and you will want to eat more and more of it. So instead, what I always advise my clients as well as people within the community is to figure out the types of foods that you like and then then find ways to make it fit your goals. So you'll notice the whole trend without this video. We're gonna be talking a lot about protein, fat, and fiber because they are very important. And you can actually easily make a lot of foods that taste great also contain a good amount of protein, fat, and fiber. So like if you love Indian food, you can still make tikka masala and still have that delicious sauce and pair it with some veggies that you're going to stew in the sauce versus a bunch of rice. Or you can make your own beef and broccoli. And there are a ton of companies that are making zero sugar marinades or very low sugar marinades now for foods like beef and broccoli. Or you can have pasta that uses like a red lentil pasta, which is a lower glycemic load pasta, while also making sure you pair it with the meatballs, of course, for protein. Or you can make tacos and just load it up with some really tasty different sources of protein. Like you could have shrimp tacos, you could have breakfast type of tacos with eggs and cheese, and then top all of that with guacamole. You can make absolutely delicious food that you love, but still have it support your goals and not have it be that ultra addicting, ultra processed foods. Okay, next up, how can I lose weight? C, consistently. Really along the same lines of the last answer. If you aren't loving what you're eating, then you're going to eventually give up because food is part of our culture. It's part of what really makes us human, but you also need to make sure that it's satiating, which satiating means that it's satisfying. It raises your satiety hormones, peptide YY and CCK. It tells your brain you're full, you're satisfied, and you don't need to keep eating. Some foods do that a lot better than others. The foods that do that are those rich in protein, fat, and fiber. Protein is the best at that, and then fat and fiber are also very important add-ons to the protein to make sure you're getting that well-rounded meal to feel that full satisfaction. Because if you're always hungry and you're not enjoying your food, it's not going to work consistently. Okay, now before we move on, I want to give a huge thank you to today's sponsor, Element. Element is an amazing electrolyte company that I've been using for over 3 years now that was specifically created with intermittent fasting, athletes, and whole food eating in mind. It contains the sodium, magnesium, and potassium to help balance out electrolyte levels all without having any sugar. And especially when you start eating more whole foods and less processed foods, our sodium and electrolyte needs actually go up because we aren't getting as much from our food. And those electrolytes are very important. We need especially sodium to send signals from our brain to the rest of our body. It literally is part of every single action within our body. This is why low sodium levels or something called hyponatremia can cause a lot of issues like feeling fatigued and low energy or headachy. I take anywhere between 1 to 2 elements per day to make sure that I feel my best and that I actually feel hydrated. And Element makes it really easy to do because they taste so good. My absolute favorite is their grapefruit salt, but they also currently have their limited release chocolate medley, and each box comes with 10 chocolate raspberry, 10 chocolate chai, and 10 chocolate mint. These are really great with hot water to replace other sugary chocolate drinks while still getting your important electrolytes in. They're perfect for those cold nights when you want to cozy up with a little treat that is also in line with your wellness goals. And right now, Element is offering my viewers a free sample pack with any order. That's 8 single-serve packets free with any Element order. It's a really great way to test out all 8 flavors, so you can get yours at drinkelement.com/autumn. This is only available through a link, so make sure to check out DRINKLMNT.com/autumn. The link is also in the description down below. Okay, next up, how can I lose weight? D, during my period. So it's definitely true your energy needs do go up when you're on your period, which is probably why there are more cravings and just more hunger. But there's also a theory that our carb cravings specifically, because carbs to an extent when eaten in the right way do help to balance out our cortisol levels, which is that stress hormone. So if you do find yourself craving carbs, it's not necessarily problematic. You just want to make sure that those carbs are medium glycemic load, which means that they aren't going to have a huge impact on your blood sugar level. It's not going to cause a huge spike and crash in your blood sugar. And those medium glycemic load carbs tend to also be more nutrient dense and actually provide nutrient value. So instead of having something like mac and cheese pasta, having something like sweet potato, or using lentils or having some banana, all of those would be better sources of medium glycemic load carbs that would better serve your goals and actually provide some nutrient density. Okay, next up, how can I lose weight? E, easily. Honestly, when you're not hungry, when you love what you're eating, it is pretty simple. But it does take a little bit of background knowledge and unlearning of some traditional just calories in, calories out mentality to get there in the first place. This is where I would just highly recommend binging a lot of my videos because you can go through so much and learn so much about nutrition and what makes you satisfied in a short amount of time and absolutely change the trajectory of your wellness experience. The level of food freedom that you can get is amazing. I'll have one video that I think would be great for you to start off with linked right up here if you want to check that out next. Okay, next up, how can I lose weight? F, fast. So So if you want to do it fast, what a lot of people say is just eat a lot less calories, get in a big calorie deficit, and also do a lot of cardio, because those two things make it so that you're burning a lot of calories and you're technically going to be losing a lot of weight. What they just don't tell you is where that weight is coming from or what happens to your body in the process, because this method will also cause you to gain the weight back the easiest. You guys probably have seen or remember that show, The Biggest Loser, and they found that years later, a lot of the contestants had absolutely destroyed metabolism still to this day and still have very, very low metabolisms, but gain that weight back. And that's because of the simple eat less, move more strategy is just absolutely failing them. When you do this, yes, you will lose weight, but you're losing a lot of that weight from muscle, which slows your metabolism and makes it harder to keep that weight off and so much easier to gain it back. Because now at rest, instead of burning like 1,600 calories, you're burning like 1,200 calories, 1,100 calories, which means you have to keep eating less and less and less. And that is simply not sustainable, not even just from a simple lifestyle standpoint, but also from a practical standpoint. We do need nutritional value for our body to actually survive, and just eating less and less and less will not allow us to do that. So instead, the approach you want to do is to make sure that you're prioritizing losing fat while keeping muscle. Muscle is the thing that will help you to save your metabolism during that fat loss process. And the simple answer for that combination of making sure you can have weight loss that actually lasts, will be eating protein, fat, and fiber, and making sure that you have proper strength training. There's so much more to it than that, but that is like the simple answer, which actually leads me to the next one. There's nothing really for G, but this was the next answer. How can I lose weight and gain muscle? So you must be eating enough protein. If you're not eating enough protein, then you are literally not eating the thing that is repairing your muscles in the first place. So not only will you not be gaining muscle, but you'll actually be losing muscle in the process. So you must be eating enough protein, but in addition to that, you also need that strength training to challenge your muscles to actually grow. Muscle is very metabolically expensive. It costs our body a lot of calories and energy to maintain. So if we're not using it, then we'll literally lose it. So proper strength training is required. Again, make sure you either get a trainer, or there are a lot of online resources. Some are better than others. Mind Pump has some great programs if you want to check them out, but you do need to make sure that you're having enough protein from high quality sources and strength training. Okay, next up, how can I lose weight? H, healthy. Simply the basic answer, protein, fat, and fiber. But if you want to go that next step and really make sure that you're actually healthy and living your healthiest life during this weight loss process, but also just for the long term, you also want to make sure you're focused on nutrient density. This means eating the foods that are the most dense in micronutrients. And a lot of people don't really understand what that means, because they think that means just eating like a lot of fruit, a lot of veggies. That's actually not the case. There's some veggies that are more nutrient dense, like green leafy veggies are very nutrient dense. But outside of that, the most nutrient dense foods that you'll eat are a lot of animal-based proteins. But interestingly, not chicken. Chicken is not very nutrient dense at all. Some of the most nutrient dense proteins are things like lamb and beef and whole milk and eggs. Also, of course, organ meats, which has been getting a lot of attention lately, and shellfish and crustaceans. So if you like shrimp, great. But pairing that protein, fat, and fiber approach with also making sure that you're getting those really nutrient dense foods is like the best way to go about it. Okay, next up, how can I lose weight? I in my face / stomach / thighs. The whole I section was just like in my blank. Now, to some extent, everyone will lose or gain weight really just based on genetic. You can't really spot reduce, as they say. However, there is one just little caveat here, and that's for weight gain around the belly, which is often tied to insulin resistance. And that weight gain around the belly, aka visceral fat, especially if that weight gain is within the belly and not just on the outside. This is actually the most dangerous type of body fat to gain. And this is often caused by a few factors. One, of course, being alcohol, one being a lot of high sugar intake, especially of ultra processed foods. And then the other having high cortisol or stress levels. So that could be from a high stress life, or actually not moving enough, or moving too much, or getting really poor quality sleep. I have a whole hormone balancing series from like 6 years ago. It's one of my first videos that I put out. If you want to check that out, I will have it linked up here. That goes into more of those details. Okay, how can I lose weight? J, just by walking. Walking is a great tool. I'm like infamous at this point with my walking versus running video that came out like also 6 years ago. It's low impact. It doesn't spike cortisol. It's something that pretty much everybody can do. It also keeps the body more of that fat burning zone versus the carbohydrate burning zone, because the heart rate stays lower, which I found makes it so that you don't get the negative impacts of getting a lot of carb cravings and a lot of hunger that just running will do. So studies show that the benefits of walking start at about 8,300 steps per day. So walking more can provide great fat loss results. However, we still fall into that trap of making sure that you don't just eat whatever you want, because still those ultra processed addictive foods can and will always still be problematic if that makes up the entirety or a good portion of what you you eat. You can't outwalk, outrun, out-exercise a ultra-processed food-centered diet. Okay, next up, how can I lose weight? Kids. So let me start off. This is not medical advice. And this can be tough because you want to make sure that you're setting up your kid for the healthiest life possible and setting them up for success. But you also want to make sure that they don't develop bad attitudes around food or possible bad relationships with food. So from my experience, again, not medical advice, but here are a few tips that I found have worked well. First of all, don't focus on calories. That is like the number one way to just instill a bad relationship with food in a kid. But you can start with swapping out some high sugar, ultra processed foods with better alternatives. I have a whole video on like better snack options that are higher in protein. If you want to check that out, I'll have it linked right up here. But an example of this, like if your kid loves chocolate pudding, you could swap it out for that avocado chocolate pudding, which sounds gross, but you don't even taste the avocado. It's high in fat and fiber. You can sneak in some protein, some unflavored protein there if you want. And you could even put in a little bit of honey or maple syrup just to give it a little bit of that sweetness and not make it such a shock for your kid, but they're still getting a much better alternative. Another really big thing is to get them involved in cooking. This is something that I think like really saved me as a kid, is that I got really involved in cooking at a very young age with my mom. And even at our school, at our elementary school, we had this really cool like school garden where we set up a garden and we learned how to tend to the garden. Every grade got to actually be part of like a certain section of the garden. And then at the end, when we went to harvest it, somebody came in and they showed us like how to make a very simple broccoli soup. And because we all were so involved in the process and we also learned how to make the recipe, we were literally chopping everything up along with them. Every single kid ate every last bite and loved it. So being part of the process, I found, makes it so that kids are so much more involved and so much more invested and actually will at least try the food. But you do have to make it taste great. Steamed broccoli and chicken is just not gonna cut it. I obviously have a lot of recipes, free recipes on my website, free recipes on my YouTube channel and my various cookbooks and programs. So I have a ton of resources to check out. Cauliflower nachos though, that recipe I'll also have linked right up here. That's been a huge fan favorite with a lot of families and their kids. Okay, how can I lose weight? Lifting weights. Lifting weights, great tool. That is one tool to help with resistance training, help to make sure that you're not losing muscle during the fat loss process. Just make sure you're using it right. Again, I'll have that resource of like a good trainer option linked down description below if you want to check that out. And you want to aim for about 0.73 grams of protein per pound of body weight. This is a good rule of thumb to aim for, and especially for lifting weights, you might want to actually do that calculation to make sure that you're hitting those protein needs. Another good tool is make sure that you're eating mostly low glycemic load, but also having daily some medium glycemic load carbohydrates to help fuel that muscle recovery. I also have a whole blog post with a chart of medium, low, and high glycemic load carbohydrates. If you want that as a resource, it is also linked down description below. Okay, next up, there's nothing really for M. So how can I lose weight in a month? So everyone will lose weight at different rates, but most people, when they're using the right tools, can actually make some decent progress in a month. Just really, I can't stress this enough, don't get caught in that cycle of just trying to restrict what you're eating because you're on this like time crunch of in a month. That will just lead to more of that yo-yo dieting and probably gaining back more than what you actually lost because that slowed metabolism. Go back to that earlier tip I mentioned earlier of how to properly go about it, and it will much better serve you for the short term and the long term. Okay, how can I lose weight naturally without exercising? Going back to the basics, protein, fat, and fiber. However, I don't want to dismiss the fact that exercise is a very important tool to help hold on to muscle mass. So if you can get any type of exercise in, even if it's just going for a very short walk, if you're currently getting 500 steps per day, try and make it 1,000, try and make it 1,500. Just try and push yourself just a little bit further, just get yourself a little bit more active, because it's not just about weight loss, but it's also about the long-term health impact that the weight loss will have on our body. And when you do it the right way, you can really double down on those benefits and help see better results when you even just incorporate a small, tiny amount of walking alone. Okay, next up, how can I lose weight? On a plant-based diet. You will likely lose weight initially on a plant-based diet because typically people are switching over from eating more processed to less processed foods. So you're eating lower glycemic loads. So you're already going to be losing weight because simply you just can't eat as much as you did with an ultra processed food diet. I just did a video a while back on ultra processed diets and how people tend to eat 813 extra calories per day when they eat an ultra processed food diet. So just switching to more whole foods is a really good step in the right direction. However, there are some pitfalls with a plant-based diet that you do need to be aware of. The big one is that there's a lot of processed plant-based foods now, especially the processed meats. so nutrient poor, I would avoid those. Obviously, a lot of treats that are still just highly processed food, like a candy bar that's plant-based is still a candy bar. There's also a multitude of nutrient deficiencies that you need to be aware of, like vitamin B12 is a very big one that can cause permanent nerve damage, and it is simply just not available in plant-based foods, as well as iron, and that leading to anemia. And plant-based diets will inherently be lower in protein, so it can be hard to maintain those results and maintain your muscle mass. Now, some say you can't do it. There are some people that do fine with a plant-based diet, but you do really need to make sure that you're being careful about properly structuring a plant-based diet to prevent those nutrient deficiencies, taking the supplements that you need to take, and using the right types of fermented proteins to hit your protein needs. So I've done a couple of videos on this in the past. Maybe I'll do like more of a deep dive, but let me know if you want that video in the comments down below. Okay, next up, how can I lose weight? PCOS. So PCOS is typically also going to have high insulin levels. So with PCOS, the goal is usually going to be help to resensitize your body to insulin. So some great tools is only exclusively sticking to low glycemic load carbs. Having more of those medium or high glycemic load carbs can have their place if you're more active or if you're focused on like a strength training goal once your body is more sensitive to insulin again. But at this state, when insulin resistance is a concern, sticking to the low glycemic load carbs is a much better option. But another thing to watch out for is the quality of your exercise too, because high levels of cortisol can also cause high levels of insulin. So too much or too little exercise can both cause that high stress level on the body. Too much caffeine can also cause too much of that cortisol spike, as well as poor sleep. So it's not just the food. The food is a big step, but you also want to make sure that you're balancing out those other factors too. Okay, how can I lose weight? Q, quickly. I answered this above, so just get back to that one. How can I lose weight? R, running. So we kind of talked about this one earlier. When people are trying to lose weight fast, they'll often say just like cut calories and do a lot of cardio. That's to get that big calorie deficit. But running is also unique because it's not a great tool for holding on to muscle mass. And it's a type of exercise that the longer you do it, the less calories you burn. So if you used to burn 100 calories per mile, eventually the more trained you get, you'll burn like 70 or 60 calories per mile. So you have to keep running more and more and more to maintain those results. I've also found that when I was training for the half marathon as well as the full marathon, and various triathlons, that when you do a lot of endurance, it does tend to really spike your carbohydrate cravings, which can tend to get you to eat well beyond your body's needs, especially if it's those high glycemic load carbs like pasta. So you can lose weight running, and running can be a great heart health tool, but you want to make sure it's balanced out with other forms of cross training. So you could swim, you could cycle, resistance training obviously is important, walking and having proper rest days, and actually making sure that you're focused on the right types of foods. You just simply can't outrun a bad diet. And also it's good to note that you don't have to like carbo load in order to see the best results. In fact, endurance training is a lower intensity exercise, which means that you are exercising when your heart rate is lower and therefore it's burning more fat versus carbohydrates. So you can get your body fat adaptive. You just need to make sure you're also eating the fats to fuel that exercise. So swapping out some of those high glycemic load carbs for things like healthy fats like avocados, olives, cheese, and then nuts are all great options. Okay, how can I lose weight? S, safely. Don't track calories, learn about satiety, learn about glycemic load and nutrient density, eat according to your hunger cues, and make sure that you're actually eating enough protein. Pretty much everything we've just been talking about, but again, just binge my channel. You'll learn everything you need to know. Okay, how can I lose weight? T, the fastest, quickest, healthiest. Again, answered earlier. Okay, how can I lose weight? U, under my chin / upper body. Again, answered earlier. You can't really spot reduce, except for when it comes to visceral fat. That is something that you have a little bit more control over. Okay, there wasn't really anything for V, but there was how can I lose weight with vinegar. So vinegar is also a good tool that does help to stabilize blood sugar level, especially after a higher carb meal. I like to use either diluted apple cider vinegar or lemon juice. So it is important to help prevent cravings and help prevent those blood sugar crashes, but it can't solve everything. Like you can't just drink some diluted apple cider vinegar before having a huge thing of pasta and like a ice cream sundae and think that it's going to counter out all of that sugar and starchy dense food. I view vinegar as that 5% tool. It's one of those tools that won't get you 95% of your results, but once you've covered those 95% of your results with the basics, then you can take these small little tools that might help make that extra 5% difference and help you get that last little bit to your goal. Okay, how can I lose weight? W, without changing my diet. That's another one I answered earlier as well. I think it was like the second or third one where I talked about specifically ultra processed foods and the addictive quality. There's nothing for X and nothing for Y, but then we have how can I lose weight? Z while on Zoloft. So when I was researching this, I saw that people tend to gain about 6 pounds after 2 years on Zoloft. What the theory is that it's from an increased appetite as well as increased carb cravings specifically when they are on these medications. So obviously we need to address the cravings and the appetite and make sure that you're feeling satisfied, which again, you can see brings us back to protein, fat, and fiber. I know it might sound like it's that simple, but when you actually truly address eating enough protein, it really does help to solve a lot of these issues. The problem is people are just not eating enough, and they're also not eating the highest quality sources, meaning the sources that are high diaz and the easiest to absorb. But on this topic of Zoloft, there's also many studies that showing people who eat more animal-based foods tend to have lower rates of depression and anxiety, and also people who exercise more frequently tend to have lower rates of depression. So by incorporating more consistent exercise, as well as trying to eat foods that are going to be more blood sugar stabilizing and more satiating, not only could it help with a weight loss goal, but it also could help with other aspects of your wellness goals as well. And I say this as somebody who used to suffer from really severe anxiety, and it wasn't until I started to eat a lot more animal-based foods like dairy and red meat where I had significantly lower anxiety levels. And I actually did a full video recently where I rated the top 30 healthiest foods according to US News. And as you could probably tell, I disagreed with quite a few of them. So if you want to check out that video next, it's linked right up here. Also, if you're new to my channel and you love this science-backed information, make sure you subscribe right here. Come out new videos every Tuesday and Thursday. All right, guys, thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in my next video.